Hey, we're at the MedtechVISION conference, and I'm thrilled to include and introduce Mika Nishimura, someone I've known for a long time, and I want to get your thoughts on the conference. Thanks so much for sitting down.
No, it's my pleasure, and what a treat to be here in person, right? MedtechVISION, was something that I have really grown up with in our industry. A lot of my colleagues were founders of the organization. We shared that same vision that we wanted to have female-led, female-focused MedTech conference that just talks about really timely topics. And as I've sort of seen the maturity, the organization mature and grow and the next generation come up, it was always such a highlight of early fall for me. And it was so sad, when the pandemic came and none of us were going to in-person conferences. And it warms my heart that it's back in person. It's back really strong.
Yeah, that's the interesting part. I was sitting earlier and just by myself eating breakfast, and it feels festive. Like there's a certain kind of feel. So I'm curious, if that organic, do you think that that's something that they try to inject into the event? Because you and I have been in plenty of conferences where it wasn't very exciting and you're just there to do what you got to do.
Right.
So what do you think is different about this that it feels that way?
Yeah. I'm sure you heard the story about how this whole thing came about. And you're right, because I've been to plenty of conferences, whether it's an academic focus conference or investor conference, and you're there to do a job. And you may run into some friends and, you're like chit-chatting, but it doesn't have that same community feel. This one, from day one, has always had that community feel. And I think it was Angela Merkel, the former German chancellor, who said, no, it's not Angela. I think it was actually Madeleine Albright, who said there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. And
Wow,
this organization was started that all of us, who are now kind of more on the senior rank, side, maybe not in age, but senior, rank, to really kind of bring up that next generation, of community. So from the day zero, it was like that. So yeah, that's why I look forward to this event. It's not because, have a speed dating sheet of all these companies that I'm going to meet and whatnot, which is normally my objective when I go to different, type of conference. But here, I'm just really, excited to get to know the new members of the community, renew old friendships, help each other, get to know people that I've never run across before, and it's terrific.
It seems very genuine, I think is the word that I was looking for. Like there's nothing inauthentic about this. So you have a bit of a unique perspective in that you're also more of a board-related type of perspective on how do we get more women to get to that level, because quite honestly, it's such a who knows who kind of club, and I'll be on your board, you'll be on my board, but women sometimes don't have a seat at either table.
Right.
So now that you've broken through that, first of all, how do you transition that to anyone else, number one, and number two, how do you maintain it? How do you keep so you don't ever slow down, that you're on either boards continually or more boards than you were before? Like, I'm curious how you balance all that.
Yeah. As you said, my journey to the boardroom has been a relatively recent one over the last, couple of years that I really pursued board seats, was very intentional about it, got a lot of help from my female MedTech friends who are at that position where they were CFOs, CEOs, board members who were looking to have other women join their ranks. So I really certainly benefited from their extending their hand to lift me up. And so as I look at an organization like this, and I'm actually involved in MedtechWOMEN's boardroom series. I was,
with Nancy, right?
So I was one of the panel members, along with Renee Ryan, for example, to talk about knowing your why and why do you want to join a board? What is board service like? So I was part of that discussion a couple months ago. And so as a board member, diversity, at every level is really important. So, and the boardroom is just one end of that spectrum, but to get to the boardroom, you really need leaders and talented people to rise through the ranks, whether it is at a startup or whether it's at a big company, and have that funnel of people with unique skill sets and experiences that they can bring ultimately, eventually, to the boardroom. So an organization like this, where you have people at all different levels. You have product engineers, you have clinical research specialists, all the way to CEOs of public companies. That's really special to me because I like giving back to the industry that's been enormously good to me, and one that I've really had a fulfilling career. I like to be able to give it back so that people can follow in footsteps. And if boardroom is ultimately where they want to get to, I just would like to extend a hand.
So how do you explain to them, and I've never asked anyone this, how do you explain to them, okay, this is what's going to happen. You're going to come into the room, you may be the only woman in the room. You're going to come into the room, there may be only two, and I don't know how well received you're going to be, how vocal you should be. Like, do you help them with language and their behavior, or is it not that personal? And once you get them to the point where they can get on a board, you let them drive their own personality?
Yeah, no, great question. I think there is certainly a lot of expectation setting that you need to do with anybody who's new to board service, right? So first of all, what's the role of a board? What sort of discussions take place at a board? How do you prepare yourself so that you are talking at that level? Because your experience today with the industry or in your job function may be very much, could be strategic, but oftentimes it's also just very tactical. You're operationally trying to execute things. You have to set expectations, and in the boardroom, it's not your job to do the management's job. It's your job to select the right management, have an input in that, help with the strategy, and oversee that strategy, but you are not going to be the ones, driving the marketing campaign or enrolling patients into clinical studies. So that's not the job. So you first need to kind of educate people about what is the role of the board and how is that different from maybe your experience to date in the industry. And then every board has different dynamics, right? As you said, are you the first female? Are you the only female currently on the board? Who are the other board members like? What's on top of mind, for the board? Is it a collegiate board or is it a little bit, hierarchical? You need to be able to find the right fit for you. And how do you find that? Like, what questions should you be asking, as you're looking at boards? That this is going to be a right environment and a right fit, or at least something that you feel comfortable with. So that type of coaching comes a little bit later in the board journey, as they are being considered, at least, for some board positions, and then you have to sort of ask the right questions. And I still ask a lot of questions to who I call board buddies. People who are experienced board members who have served on a particular board for a number of years, know the board dynamics, know some of the history behind some of the issues that we're talking about, and all the way down to mundane things like, how formally should I dress for the board meeting, right? Can I show up in like business casual, or is everybody like wearing suits?
What is the norm? I don't know the answer to that.
It very much depends. So last week I was this week. It's been dog years. But I was at SI Bone board meeting, which was taking place in Hillsburg in the wine country. And it was during the heat wave too. So we were told, come in shorts, loose-fitting dresses, none of this formal jacket and a skirt or a jacket and your slacks type of thing. So we were all dressed very casually for that. But typically, you dress a little bit more formally than that. Hoya, which is a Japanese company, not a typical Japanese company, but still a Japanese company and a really large cap company. The first board meeting, was at annual shareholder meeting, so I had to dress very conservatively. My dark blue dress and my dark blue blazer and pumps, with heels like this and pearls, so that's kind of how I dress.
The uniform.
uniform, yeah. Sure.
Look, I think that's one of the other things that you're able to share is, look, you have to be a bit of a chameleon sometimes, and you're going to be in different situations where it's very California casual or it's very old school.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time. I mean, I have vowed I'm never going to wear a tie again. It's just not going to do it. So with all of that being said, and so much good coming from this, what happens tomorrow? Next week, how do we continue to amplify this? What other programs can we do to continue this great feeling of where we're headed, but to actually execute and have something actionable occur?
Yeah. You're talking about like, just MedtechWOMEN, type of organizations.
Right, because so many
yeah.
times this happens and everyone has this unbelievable feeling and
Right.
like, okay, what do we do now?
Right. What I personally try to do, and I think a lot of my colleagues here try to do, is it's not about speed dating at an event like this, right? It's great, that you may happen to sit next to somebody, at a lunch table. Actually, I got to know a board member for a company that I ended up working for at this conference many years
right?
ago. Yeah. So that's how I ended up joining Envision Medical. I was a panelist at that particular event a few years back. And the board member for Envision was sitting in the audience. She had heard about me before. So after the panel was over, over lunch, she sat next to me at the lunch table and started talking about this company, and which piqued my interest. And so that's how I ended up at Envision. So those things can happen. It's really about how I see what happens a week from today, a month from today, 6 months down the road from something like this is I try to have meaningful conversations with a few people that I have done a little bit of research ahead of a conference like this that I deliberately sought out, and I say, hey, I would love to get to know you, and here's why. And then, have follow-up conversations with those individuals. I try to be intentional and I try to be deliberate, about that. But I'm also feel that it is my obligation and my desire to respond, to young people who reach out to me in a similar manner and are looking to have sustained relationship with me, whether it's for mentoring purposes or that they were trying to get into the board room. And so give
That's
and
always been
receive.
you. You've always made time, even when I first met you and I didn't have any relationship with you, and still the callback was immediate. As much time as I needed on the phone, never rushed me off at every conference. And I don't know if that's just you or you've grown into that person, but that's been you for all the years that I've known you. It's just who you are, I think. I think the word that we're looking for is proactive. I think you can't walk away from this and then just let it sit.
Right.
There has to be some initiation of action that's incumbent on the person who was here.
Yeah.
And I think the organization does a nice job of making sure everyone has each other's information and the networking can continue. Well, that's great. Look, I knew you'd be great for this. Appreciate you taking the time to sit down.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's
man.
always good to see you.
All right,
All right.
great.